The doctors, along with many others, including her husband's family, refused to let their son marry this girl because, according to them, she was sterile and would not be able to adapt to the difficulties of being a member of her husband's tribe. But what happens years later is incredible. Elena was born and raised in Minsk. She graduated from the institute, taught English, pursued personal development, and never thought about Africa. A wealthy Spaniard offered her his hand and heart, but she preferred a black student from Nigeria. She was unable to have a child, and the doctor's prognosis was grim. But Elena refused to accept the diagnosis of infertility. She now has 4 lovely children and her own dance school in her husband's homeland. She also fell in love with a country where foreigners are often kidnapped for ransom, and where corruption levels are among the highest in the world. Elena was born and raised in the capital of Belarus, and was a completely ordinary child, except that she was very curious and somewhat unpredictable. Her university professors sometimes said, with skepticism, that nothing good would come from her. At 19, she was already teaching English to children, studying at the same time, and trying out different fields. She sang, danced, never parted with her guitar, took various courses, and even sold cosmetics. But she never had the crazy idea of moving to Africa. At 26, she'd already received a marriage proposal from a wealthy and serious Spaniard. However, she didn't give her consent, doubting her own feelings. Then, a Nigerian student named Don came into her life. Elena was introduced to him by a friend who had been in love with her for a long time. But Don's love for Elena initially seemed unrequited. For 3 months, he tried to court her and show her affection. Everyone spoke highly of Don. His Russian teacher, with whom he studied at the university, said with admiration that this dark-skinned young man was the best foreign student their university had seen in the last quarter-century. Elena's friends accused her of being hard-hearted, drawing her attention to Don's best qualities: his kindness, intelligence, lack of bad habits, and love for her. However, Elena remained indifferent, seeing him only as a friend. Then, one Christmas, out of nowhere, she suddenly realized she couldn't live without him. She called him, then rushed to the hostel to say just 3 words: "I love you." Don didn't propose in a grand romantic way. He simply visited her parents and asked for her hand. At first, Elena's parents were upset, but seeing the happiness in their daughter's eyes, they didn't interfere with her marriage. However, things were much more difficult with others. Elena was insulted more than once in the street. People literally spat after her and treated her with undisguised contempt. Don's parents weren't happy with his choice either, but they didn't argue about it. Elena and Don lived in Minsk for 2 years. During that time, she was unable to give birth to a child and experienced a failed pregnancy. But she refused to believe the doctor's words that she might never have children. Her husband had his own business in Belarus, was one of the top graduates from a master's program, and was always charming and joyful. Their eldest daughter was born in Minsk, and a few months later, Don's business collapsed. The couple decided to try their luck in Don's homeland, with the support of his family. Don transferred his savings and the proceeds from the sale of their possessions to his parents to invest in a new business and to create a stable environment for his family. But in the end, all the money was invested in vain. The business they opened together did not survive, and Don did not receive a visa to travel to Europe. They decided to go to Nigeria. Before leaving, they had already managed to become parents and boarded the plane with an 8-month-old daughter in their arms. Elena recalls with horror her first trip with a baby, a long, difficult flight that lasted nearly a day, followed by the journey to her husband's parents and a life of poverty in a vast estate. Before leaving, Elena had read everything she could about Nigeria, about the government, the musicians, the politicians, and the tribes. She had heard her acquaintances' doubts about her decision and terrifying stories about white people being sacrificed in Nigeria, a European woman's long hair being cut off in the street because Africans supposedly liked it, and that her husband would surely have another wife and many children in his homeland. Thankfully, the reality didn't match those horrors. but the first years of life in Africa could seem like hell to anyone. She lived for 4 years under the same roof as her husband's parents, in a house where electricity appeared only occasionally, and there was no water at all. She washed with her hands because rats chewed through the washing machine cord, cooked food over a fire, and even managed to work at a school for a pitiful salary. She realized she didn't have money for a return ticket, so she began to settle into the local society for the sake of her husband and her little daughter. She had to learn to cook over a campfire, do laundry without a washing machine, and endure local diseases. Her husband's family didn't believe she could manage and even cared for him as if he were married to a local woman. But Don wasn't a traitor. He stubbornly searched for a way out and worked hard to secure a future for his family. The hardships only made her stronger. She learned to take pride in having overcome all the challenges, kept her confidence, and became the mother of 4 wonderful daughters. The oldest is now 17 and the youngest is 2. To provide her daughters with a bright future, Elena decided to open her own dance school. Today, she is doing what she loves, teaching choreography, and she also runs an online shop selling African souvenirs. She is proud of having become strong and, despite everything, has maintained her self-confidence. Elena still hasn't gotten used to the bribery at the airport, the frequent lack of electricity and hot water in the house. She is surprised by the high prices in grocery stores and the questions from strangers about the souvenirs she should have brought. She curiously studies African traditions, especially in the north, and the customs of the country that gave her the best husband in the world. She dreams of happiness for her daughters. When she arrives in Minsk to visit her parents, she's surprised by how cheap the products are and how all the streets are lit up in the evening, because electricity in Nigeria feels like a holiday. She doesn't understand why people don't smile on the streets and how 6- and 7-year-old children can move around the city alone, while her daughters don't even step outside the gate without being accompanied by their parents. But at the same time, she wouldn't trade her life in Nigeria, with all its problems, for a prosperous and well-equipped life in Minsk. Her husband is the son of the chief of the Ugo tribe, and at the airport she was escorted with the words, "Our African wife is leaving." Over the 17 years spent in Africa, Elena became part of it, and most importantly, she was happy in Africa. They live in Nigeria, raising 4 wonderful daughters, and they are an example of how love and mutual support can overcome the most difficult obstacles. Today, Elena and Don are quite prosperous. They have a stable income, drive their own vehicles, and can provide their daughters with a quality education. What do you think of this story? If you liked it, give the video a thumbs up and, most importantly, share it with your friends and family.